What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. First and foremost, y'all already know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, hit the post notification bell so you'll know whenever I push out any new content. I'll say it, I've said it once, I'll say it again. There's going to be a lot of content coming out here in these next few weeks and months talking about these Falcons. We're going to dive into some Braves content here eventually as we get closer to opening day. Man, listen, just because the Falcon season is over, it don't mean the season's over here. So with that being said, we continue the search for a new head coach. The Falcons actually ain't even put in any interview requests for a new head coach. Now, they did say, Arthur Blank and Rich McKay did say that they were going to announce after they interviewed the head coach that they had talked to them. And weren't going to announce it beforehand, but obviously it could still get out because of agents talking to the Adam Schefters, the Tom Paracellos, the Ian Rappaports, all that good stuff. But we still ain't heard that they put any requests in. What does that mean? We're going to have to talk about that here coming up pretty shortly. But right now, we continue to search for the head coaches. We continue to look at coaching candidates. And today, we have landed on Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is maybe I'm not going to say maybe. He is maybe the hottest head coaching candidate out here in general. Definitely the hottest when you're looking at it from the perspective of the coordinator side of things. Potential coordinator who could be jumping into that head coaching role. It doesn't get any bigger this offseason than Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. So without further ado, man, let's get right into Ben Johnson and what he's all about. So Coach Johnson's resume. He started out in 2009 at Boston College as a graduate assistant. Then he worked his way up to a tight ends coach. Then he would make the switch over to the NFL. He would go to pro football. He would start off with the Miami Dolphins. He was with that franchise for 7 years, climbing the way up the ranks. He became an offensive assistant, was actually an assistant quarterback coach there for a season. He became a tight ends coach, and he even became the wide receiver coach for the Miami Dolphins in his later years there, 2017, 2018. Then in 2019, he went over to the Detroit Lions where he became the offensive quality control coach. He became a tight ends coach. And then as 2021 came around and Dan Campbell came into Detroit, he saw a more prominent role. He took over the passing game. And then in 2022, he was named the Lions offensive coordinator. And since then, man, we know what the story has been. The Detroit Lions have been maybe the most exciting team to watch in football these past 2 seasons, or at least this past season and a half, with how exciting that offense has been, how exciting it has looked, the creativity of it, the execution, just how well in general that offense has looked. A lot of that in part due to Ben Johnson and his ability to be the offensive coordinator there for the Detroit Lions and playing a big part there. He is considered one of the brightest offensive minds in football today for that very reason. And not only that, he was a part of the key culture change that we have seen with the Detroit Lions that has been key to their success. They waited 3 decades. They are finally division champions once again. And when you look at that offense, you look at an Amon-Ra St. Brown, you look at a Jahmyr Gibbs, a David Montgomery, and when you look at a Sam Laporta, you don't got to go any further than looking at Sam Laporta and the amazing rookie season he has had. If it wasn't for a CJ Stroud, if it wasn't for a Puka Nacua, Sam Laporta, you could maybe argue, would be up there in contention for Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I think that goes to show you the job that Ben Johnson has done in getting those weapons involved and utilizing them. Going into some of the potential pros in bringing in a Ben Johnson is obviously, number one, the ability to get the playmakers involved. Look at what he did in Detroit. Look at how much of a focal point Amon-Ra St. Brown is in that offense. How much of a focal point Sam Laporta is in that offense. How much of a focal point the running game is in that offense. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, lightning and thunder, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of the big reason why the Detroit Lions are a 12-win team this year, getting ready for a big playoff matchup this Sunday night. And when you look at the big knock on the last coach, Arthur Smith, it was the inability to get his playmakers involved, to get a Kyle Pitts involved, to get Drake London involved, to get Bijan Robinson involved, to give Tyler Algier the ball as much as he probably deserved. A lot of those inefficiencies ultimately went a long way in costing Arthur Smith his job. Ben Johnson, if you bring him in here, I can almost guarantee you, is going to find ways to get Bijan Robinson the ball. You're going to see Drake London take that next step up. You're going to see Kyle Pitts maybe, hopefully, finally return to that dominant form we saw a little bit of in his rookie season, and more so just unlock that potential we really haven't seen yet. When you look at what he's done with the Sam Laporta, that is if you were to bring a Ben Johnson in here. Another thing, too, you got to look at the resurgence of Jared Goff and how good he has looked this season as the Lions quarterback. Now, listen, Jared Goff is not no superstar. He's not no MVP candidate. He's not Mahomes. He's not Allen. He's not Lamar Jackson. But he gets the ball into the hands of his playmakers. He's a quarterback. He's a game manager. And he does what he needs to do. That's why Detroit is in the good position that they are in right now, showing that if you let Ben Johnson potentially go out and, per se, get a young quarterback in the draft, if you were to bring him in as head coach, he would be in good hands because look at what he's done. Now, granted, Jared Goff is a veteran. You would have to bring along a rookie quarterback, develop him, but that is something you would have to talk about after you say you bring the head coach in, whether that's Ben Johnson or anybody. And another thing, too, that I think people have been hearing is that this guy is years ahead in terms of leadership and his ability to be that leader and be that head coach, that he has pretty much all the head coaching intangibles when you look at it. And finally, he has witnessed firsthand what it has been like to change the culture of a franchise in desperate need of it. The Falcons are in desperate need of a culture change. I've been saying that. The Detroit Lions, they finally got that culture change with Dan Campbell, but Ben Johnson played a big part of that. Ben Johnson sees a Dan Campbell, has pretty much turned into one of Dan Campbell's right-hand men in that culture change, in how that offense executes and how you see that offense. So there's a lot to like when bringing in Ben Johnson. This is why he is the top candidate as far as coordinators go on the market right now. Why every team, to a certain extent, is going to desire to want Ben Johnson as their head coach. But there are some cons. There's a little bit of cons here. First of all, even though you've heard all about he can be a great head coach, all the intangibles, he is unproven as a head coach, which is something the Falcons have seen in a lot of these past head coaching hirings, particularly Mike Smith, Dan Quinn, and most recently Arthur Smith, who was 3 years ago, you can maybe argue, the Ben Johnson of his coaching cycle. He was maybe the most desired candidate out on the market. He came to Atlanta, and it was underwhelming. So there is that element where even though, yes, Ben Johnson probably will end up being a great head coach, there is still that level that he is unproven at, and he's actually never been a head coach at any level, not even Pee Wee. So this would be his first time being the lead man in the room when you're talking about a Ben Johnson. And another thing, too, is the guy a little stuck up over his head, or is it just his agent? Because we're hearing that Ben Johnson wants up to $15 million a year. And listen, for a guy who hasn't even proven he can coach up his own 5-year-old son Pee Wee football team as the head coach, to pay him $15 million to coach up an NFL franchise as the head coach, that is definitely a little bit too much to be asking for. Now, I don't expect Ben Johnson to get paid that. I would probably say that, and you really don't hear it a whole lot about these head coaches, because that is money that comes straight out of the owner's pocket. You know, that's coming out of Blank's banking account. That's not coming from our salary cap or anything. But regardless, I don't think these owners are going to be paying Ben Johnson $15 million a year. So I think more about the $5 million range is about a fair estimate for Ben Johnson, maybe a little bit more. However, $15 million to me, too much. But nonetheless, he is a great candidate out there. There's a lot of upside. There is obviously a level of him being unproven, but at the same time, you've heard the reports that he has shown all the intangibles to be an NFL head coach. So my final thoughts on Ben Johnson, listen, wherever he goes, he's probably going to end up being a great head coach. And I would love to have him in Atlanta. I would. He is one of my top candidates out there. Obviously, I made it known yesterday that Jim Harbaugh is my most preferred one for obvious reasons. But when you're getting into the coordinators, Ben Johnson is definitely up at the top of the list. Why wouldn't he be? But with that being said, I think we're going to see how it plays out. Do I think he's going to come to Atlanta? I don't know. He's one of those guys, I could maybe see it, but I honestly don't think he's at the top of the Falcons list. I think I'll rephrase it. I think he's definitely at the top of the list, but I don't think he's the top name on that list. I think a lot of people are starting to catch on to who that top name might be. We're going to have to talk about that at a later time. But with that being said, man, if Ben Johnson were to become the head coach, I would absolutely love it. I would love to have him on board. But with that being said, I will see you guys tomorrow. As I said, man, we're on the grind over here. We're going to continue to push out content. So with that being said, man, I'll see you guys in the next one.